vegan collard greens. I know, sounds intimidating, but I'm gonna walk you through it step by step. If you're new to the channel, I'm Shayla Nettey. I'm a medical doctor as well as a plant-based personal chef. I love cooking flavorful, delicious meals that are also healthy. So let's get into it. All right, so here are our collard greens. I've already kind of taken them off the stem and I'm letting them soak here. Definitely want to wash these real good and then we'll chop them up, okay? But before we do that, I'm going to get the base ready. So since we're not using meat, it's going to be really important to flavor the broth. That's what's going to give all the flavor to the dish. So we're going to use these onions and we're just going to chop them up real fine and use that as the base for our broth to give a ton of flavor. So we got our onions ready. I like using a pressure cooker because it allows me to set this and forget it. So once it's on high, I'm gonna go ahead and saute it. So I add some avocado oil, whatever high heat oil you have, and then just pour your onions right in. Remember, this is what's gonna add the flavor. Add a pinch of salt to help the moisture come out. And we just let that saute until it gets to a nice brown. Another key ingredient I like to use are bell peppers. Usually I stick with the red bell peppers. This time I'm going to do a combination of red and yellow. And I just dice these into squares and I add these in with the onions. You could get rid of this part because it can add a little bit of bitterness. But for me, I found it doesn't really matter since I'm cooking it down. So you can do whichever your heart desires. I'm going to add about half of these bell peppers into the Instant Pot now. Oh. Actually, there's almost all of them. That's fine. I'll just add all of them. And the key is to just really get this to soften up before we get to the next step. Remember, I added a pinch of salt, so that's helping loosen up things, and the oil is keeping it from sticking to the pan. And so now I'm just gonna draining my collards that have been soaking after washing. Okay, now I'm gonna add I already chopped up some garlic. I'm gonna add that here. I'm gonna add a little bit of this hot pepper sauce. It's fermented Calabrian chili peppers. This will add a nice little spice and some acid to it as well. Saute that off. We're gonna add in our seasonings. So we're gonna use some smoked paprika. I'm gonna use some onion powder, a little bit of garlic powder to go on top of the garlic we already added. And we're gonna stir it up. It smells so good. And remember, you have to do all this in order to give a lot of flavor to the broth, since we're not gonna get the flavor from the meat. And I'd say the secret ingredient is gonna be this liquid smoke. So you can get this from any grocery store, and it adds like a smokiness, that the same kind of smoke flavor you would typically get from meat. A little bit goes a long way. As you can see, I only have like less than a teaspoon. I'm gonna add that to it. That's gonna be a lot. It's gonna change the flavor. So you can see it's starting to stick to the bottom. We're gonna add our broth now. I'm using 4 cups of veggie broth. While that simmers, we'll take our collard greens. Our collard greens have been washed. I just do like a rough chop like that. You don't even have to do this step because I already tore some of them off, but that's if you want it to be a little bit finer. Now, a key ingredient, anytime you're making collard greens, you gotta have a little bit of vinegar. I like to use apple cider vinegar. I do about a tablespoon or 2. A pinch more salt to taste. Spice with some red crushed pepper flakes. I also do add a little bit of coconut aminos, just because it gives a nice little sweetness to balance the spice and the acid. And so now the broth is nice and smoky. It's got spice to it. It's got that nice kick of vinegar as well. And now I know I can add my collard greens and I can cook in that and absorb all that flavor. And you just want to make sure you have enough liquid to almost cover it. Not quite, because these greens will cook down quite a bit. I might add just 1 more cup of broth. That would make 5 cups of broth that we've used. You just want to taste the broth again. Since we're not using any meat, you can always taste. You're not going to be contaminating anything. So you can taste the broth to make sure the broth tastes good. Because however the broth tastes, that's how the collard greens are going to taste. You want to add a little bit more vinegar. That is it. Look at that broth. That broth, the color from the paprika, the Calabrian chili peppers, it tastes delicious. And now, I usually set it to bean and chili mode and let that go. All right, so our collard greens are ready. Look at that. Ooh-wee. And it took about, so this is just how long it's been resting. It was about 20 minutes on, and I let it rest about another 30 minutes. About almost an hour all in all. Looks good. Let's plate it. Okay, so I got myself a little small bowl just to taste it for y'all. The broth is the best part with the greens. Everything, like the way the vinegar goes with bell peppers and the greens, it's gonna be a hit. All right, so you see it, we can do this easy, super easy, and I don't miss the meat. That's the part. I made this for my grandparents about a month ago. They called me and they said it was spicy, but I didn't miss the meat.